Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network begins in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network begins in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show begins in 5 seconds.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone across the globe, including my friends in Israel and China who listen every single day. And I know that. I found out over the weekend that there is a Quebec official who wants to ban the term bonjour, hi. So we're going to be in trouble in Quebec pretty soon because I'm not going to stop saying bonjour, hi. Talk to me, my friend and in-law, Russ, a Canadian, proud American citizen now, but a Canadian originally. Russ told me bonjour hi is under attack, and I read the story, and I'm sticking with bonjour hi. I don't care what they say in Quebec. Bonjour hi, Canadians. That's the way they go about it up there, both in French and English. Big news last night was not the Colts win over the Chiefs. Many of you were watching it. It's not impeachment. That's a non-starter. It's collapsing in front of your eyes. Why won't Adam Schiff release the transcripts from Thursday's hearing? Because they destroy the idea that there was a quid pro quo. I made that point with Al Sharpton yesterday. Why are Democrats in disarray? Why is everything just not going the way Adam Schiff? Why don't they just call for a vote on opening an impeachment inquiry? Because they don't want to go on the record. Adam Schiff has led them down a blind alley again for like the fifth time in 2 years. But that's not the major story. The major story is that President Trump announced yesterday that President Erdogan, a malign influence in the Middle East, let me be clear, a malign influence, is coming to D.C. to negotiate the specifics of where Turkish troops are going to be in Syria, where American troops are going to be in Syria, and the United States troops are pulling back from the lines they are in. There may be a war between the Kurds and the Turks. We're not going to be in the middle of that, and we're not leaving Syria. We are not pulling out completely. But we are, I think, what we would call is straightening our lines, and I believe Turkey is straightening theirs and expanding them. And the Kurds are unhappy, I get it, but unless somebody wants to propose the permanent garrisoning of this strip of Syria, which borders Turkey, by American troops, which I am not in favor of and no American that I know of is in favor of, there isn't an alternative. This is what they have to do. And it's been 10 months coming. I went on the trip with John Bolton to Jerusalem and Ankara after the president's initial announcement. They have phased it in. They've gone step by step to this, and now it's happening. And it's being portrayed by lefties in the media as the president palling around with an autocrat again. That's not what it is. It's what he said it was 10 months ago. We are not there permanently. He is also turning over the ISIS prisoners to Turkey because France, Germany, and Britain will not take their ISIS fighters back, and we ain't paying for them anymore. So that's the Trump doctrine in Syria. We're moving back, Turkey's moving in, and the Kurds, they have to take care of themselves or they have to move back to defensible lines. It's that simple. It is that simple. So follow that story through the morning. Second big story, the NBA feels a backlash in China and then a backlash in the United States. It began with a tweet by Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey, one of the best in the league, by the way, tweeting an image with the words, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." The PRC is a huge market for the NBA, and the PRC got very angry with the Houston Rockets, took a number of steps against them, and the Houston Rockets started backpedaling, and the NBA started backpedaling. And pretty soon Americans were saying, why is the NBA and Houston Rockets backpedaling in the face of PRC pressure? They're selling out for the dollars. It's been heard around the world. Rockets GM Daryl Morey creates China NBA tension with tweet. That's the Times of London this morning. And what I say is that the NBA does not have any idea. They've just endangered every Hong Kong protester. Because by capitulating as quickly as they did, by throwing in the towel, by embarrassing themselves, by not checking with anyone or anything that would know what's going on, there just is no knowledge of international politics in the NBA, apparently. But what they've done is they've sent a signal to President Xi that if he cracks down on the Hong Kong protesters, the commercial interests of the world will fall silent. There won't be another Tiananmen Square. That's what the NBA signaled. I believe that's a false signal. I'm hoping President Xi is smart enough to know that he picked on the weakest link in the American response to the Hong Kong demonstrators. I hope he knows that, because the NBA really endangered them by folding up like a lawn chair. Meanwhile, on the Sunday shows, the topic was impeachment, and then they talked some more about impeachment. I was on Politics Nation with Al Sharpton yesterday, and let's listen to the start of this. Al Sharpton asked me a question, cut number one.
Yeah. People seem to disregard it was the president's inspector general, the one he selected, that said there's an urgency here and there's some credibility here for concern. The Democrats didn't create this.
Oh, no, they didn't create it. And good evening, Al. Good to talk to you as always.
Good to talk to you.
I think the transcript of the phone call is everything people need to make their own conclusion. I judge it to be insignificant. Now I would like to see the transcript of Thursday's hearing at the House Intelligence Committee that went on for 8 hours, from which there were selected bits leaked, but the entire transcript should be made available because Special Envoy Volker completely destroys, according to Mark Meadows and others, the idea that there was a quid pro quo. So I'm calling on Adam Schiff to do something he has not done for 3 years, which is act honorably, and put forward the entire transcript of Thursday's hearing so that you and I and everybody else can read what happened in front of the House Intelligence Committee and judge whether or not there's an impeachable offense. It's all impeachable offense is whatever a majority of the House says it is. I don't think it's an impeachable offense.
Michelle, you says that
we then did that 3 more times. We went back and forth on that 3 more times. And I do not believe that the transcript that the president released with Zelensky is an impeachable offense. I thought it was insignificant. I do not think there's a quid pro quo. I do not believe that the president withheld aid because of the Bidens. I believe that the whistleblower has put Hunter Biden front and center in the public eye. I think when the president went out on the lawn and said China ought to investigate the Bidens, he was really saying the media ought to investigate the Bidens. And he used China as a means of getting them to do. They didn't ask China to do anything. People always want to interpret Trump in the worst possible way. I know what he said. He said, I think China should open an investigation. You know what he meant? I'm going to set the table so you people have to set an investigation going about Hunter Biden in China. And I really don't know anything about Hunter Biden in China. In Ukraine, Hunter Biden took $50,000 a month. I'm very aware that my friend Chuck Todd and my friend Ron Johnson got into sparkiness yesterday on the Sunday shows. I think that's probably overplayed. Chuck likes his questions answered like I do. I got short with David Corn once when he wouldn't answer my questions. I get short with a lot of people when they don't answer my questions, so I understand that. Ron Johnson is short with the media generally because he does not believe that they are playing kosher with this investigation. Kevin McCarthy was on with Judge Cheney yesterday, and I think he stated pretty quickly a lot of people's opinions of what's going on. Cut number 4, Kevin McCarthy.
Not at all. Nothing that he said in there is impeachable. You could even hear the Democrats admit to that. If the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, would have waited 48 hours till she had the transcript, we would never be tearing this country apart. The Democrats are just solely want to discredit democracy. They want to impeach this president, so they're going to create a system that is rigged.
And he went on to say this to Judge Jean. Cut number 5.
Not at all. He never said, I'll do this if you do that. And what the president was talking about, let's be very clear. This is an open investigation to get to the bottom of what happened with that Russia collusion. This is an open investigation that the Attorney General had said was already looking into. The President already talked about it before. This is exactly what we do with countries all around the world every single day, to work on investigations to get to the bottom of problems.
All right.
There's nothing illegal about what just happened.
And there is nothing in that conversation that suggests that military aid to the Ukraine is contingent upon a Biden investigation, correct?
Correct. And also, the hearing that we had this week with Volker and others, they said there was no quid pro quo. Money was not held up. Do you realize that President Trump had provided Ukraine more than $1 billion, where President Obama did not?
Exactly.
President Trump also gave them the missiles, or the instruments that they needed to stop the tanks, the javelins, where President Obama would not. This is why this is so crazy.
Let me keep.
Then Kevin McCarthy, one more thing about this. I want to go to cut number 7, talking about Adam Schiff. He's talking with Judge Jean Pirro. Cut number 7.
You're correct. And in the House rules, it's supposed to be in judiciary. So she pulled it out and put it with Adam Schiff, the individual who we know is the common denominator of all the lies. But that's why you did not get the transcripts of that hearing that took place this week. Because if you did, you would have heard there was no quid pro quo.
All right,
but they want to control everything. The
denominator of all the lies, Adam Schiff. Coming up after the break, I began talking with Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, on Friday's show. I continued the conversation at the end of the show. It's an important book, Tools and Weapons. It's an important set of inquiries about where we are going with tech. I will keep you posted on breaking news about Turkey, Syria, and the United States, about the NBA and China, about Brexit. There's lots going on this Monday morning. I'm happy to bring it to you. And the Browns will be killing the 49ers tonight on Monday Night Football, so don't forget that either. You're listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Good Monday to America, Hugh Hewitt. On Friday at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, the Nixon Foundation was pleased to welcome to the library Brad Smith, who is the president of Microsoft. And he has been that since 2015. He's also the chief legal officer of Microsoft. He's in charge of Microsoft's corporate, external, and legal affairs, also the firm's chief compliance officer. He also leads Microsoft Philanthropies. But the reason we had him at the library, and the reason I'm talking to him today, is his brand new book, Tools and Weapons, The Promise and the Peril of the Digital Age. Tool and Weapons is a must-read for anyone interested in where we are going technology-wise, how we in the United States are going to coexist in a bipolar world of technology dominance with China. The foreword by Bill Gates is great, but Tools and Weapons should be read by anyone who concerns themselves with the future. And I'm pleased to continue the conversation we began on Friday. Brad Smith, welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show as opposed to the Nixon Library.
Thanks. It's great to be with you again.
Now, I see you went to Columbia. Just a little inside baseball. In 1980, I had to live at Hogan Hall for a summer. It was a nightmare. I sublet it from a Columbia law student. Did you ever live in Hogan Hall?
I actually did. I lived there about 4 years later, and I agree. Those were not the best days of Hogan Hall, Columbia University, or really New York for that matter.
No, I think Hogan Hall was held up by bugs. I really do. I think it was built on a foundation of we'll just leave that there. And then I wanted to ask you.
I'll just say, having grown up in Appleton, Wisconsin, I discovered bugs in Hogan Hall that I didn't even know existed until I lived there.
My then fiance, now wife of 37 years, would not come into Hogan Hall. It was so bad. I know you've served on the board of Princeton. I hope Columbia has you on their board of visitors. Get them a new Hogan Hall. Secondly, just curious, my buddy John Denniston, who was my law school roommate at Michigan, runs around in your circles in big tech. And I'm just curious, have you run across JD?
Oh, yeah, I do from time to time. Absolutely.
Okay, we are both class of 83 at Michigan, and he tries to explain to me your world, and sometimes he succeeds, and sometimes I succeed in explaining why my world, center-right conservatives, are suspicious of your world. I want to applaud you for coming out and talking to my world. It's something Mark Zuckerberg has been doing, and I compliment big tech for trying to explain who they are and what they're doing.
Well, thank you. I think that we live at a time when technology is just changing everything. And I think one of the things we all need to do is come together, understand where technology is going, but more importantly, even understand.
The first question that I ask you at the Nixon Library is one of the questions I ask everyone. What about Warren? And by that, I mean, Warren is the Midwestern equivalent. You know, when I ask about it, it's the Midwestern equivalent of, doesn't Microsoft or one of the big tech companies go to these places and put one of those data facilities that you describe in such great details and tools and weapons there and regenerate?
Well, in fact, I think that's what we're trying to do. And there's two things that really point in that direction. First is the construction of data centers. If you look at where our data centers are being built, the huge ones, they're in, frankly, smaller towns, closer oftentimes to renewable energy, hydroelectric power, Quincy, Washington, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Boynton, Virginia. But there's another thing that we're doing because I think we need to look beyond data centers. One of the things we talk about in our book is a program that we created called TechSpark. We designed it specifically to go beyond the coast, to go to the heartland of this country, and really have local employees who work with the local community. So we're in El Paso, Texas. We're in Fargo, North Dakota. We're in a place like where I grew up, Appleton and Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it's all about learning how technology is impacting these communities and, more importantly, what we can do with local businesses, local nonprofits, local public service leaders to use technology to rejuvenate economic growth, to create jobs.
Don't go anywhere, America. Mike Allen is coming up. More on from Brad Smith next hour. It's a fascinating conversation about tech. His book is Tools and Weapons. It's at Amazon.com right now, Tools and Weapons. Mike Allen of Axios is next. What does he think about impeachment? Why is Adam Schiff sitting on a transcript? I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. On this Monday morning, I'm Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio, talking now with Mike Allen of Axios. Axios AM is the newsletter I begin my morning with. You ought to as well. And the second story today, Mike Allen, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Hugh.
You've got Margaret.
It's the first. I'm sorry, I was just going to say it's the first Monday in October, Hugh.
It is. The Supreme Court is back, and the Browns are playing the 49ers tonight. I hope you're watching. You guys snagged Margaret Tlaib over at Axios, and she's terrific. Margaret and I flew with John Bolton to Israel and Ankara, Turkey in January when the president first announced he was going to pull out of Syria. At that point, the Turks wouldn't meet with Bolton. They just totally stiffed us. We sat around for hours. We went home. Since that time, the president has been trying to get out of Syria because he does not want a permanent garrison there. He has now said it is happening. I don't really know what the alternative is, Mike, other than a permanent garrison of American troops there. Do you?
Well, but you know the consequences and the fact that you've been on the ground. You'll appreciate it. The headline of item 2 of Axios AM, sorry, Kurds. And I really appreciate your recalling your travel with Margaret, which I didn't know about. Margaret points out in her thought bubble why it matters for Axios AM. The Trump's policy change could be deadly news for the Kurdish fighters in northern Iraq who've been U.S. partners in the fight against Iraq. And she points out, as you well know, the Kurds have long feared that Turkey would cross the border and kill them if we left Syria.
Now, for people to understand, there are about 5 million Kurds in Iraq. They are not endangered. They fought with us. They are not endangered. There are 2 million Kurds in Syria. Many of them are endangered. There are 18 million Kurds in Turkey who present a threat to the Turkish government. That's why the Turks don't want the Syrian Kurds to organize. And there are 8 million Kurds in Iran who are always under repressive rule. The Kurds got screwed when the map of the Middle East was drawn up after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. There's no way around it. But the central part of their home is in northern Iraq. This Syrian outpost that we have helped protect for many years, we help them help us beat ISIS. ISIS is defeated, Mike Allen. I keep asking my friends who want us to stay. I asked them in January as well, how long? Because we've got to make our pivot to the east. We really need to get our troops and our forces rearranged to deal with the growing significance of the People's Republic of China.
Well, Hugh, that's not, of course, as you well know, that's, of course, sort of not mutually exclusive. But I hear in your voice that you support the president's efforts to pull back around the world. Are there any places where he would pull back and you wouldn't?
Yes, I would expand the fleet and I would move more troops into Japan. I would strengthen our presence in Australia. I really believe that China represents the rest of the century challenge and that we have to be prepared to go toe-to-toe with them. And that brings me to my third thing in Axios AM, the NBA's China problem. It's actually all of our problem. Let me begin by telling people the NBA had no idea what it was walking into when Houston general manager tweeted out support of Hong Kong demonstrators. China brought the hammer down and the NBA retreated. And I think Mike endangered the Hong Kong demonstrators by giving President Xi a false signal about what the West will do if he uses violence. I think this is a very serious situation.
100%. And the United States cannot knuckle under to other countries threatening our companies just because their top officials exercise their First Amendment rights and support democracy. Ian Bremmer's tweet says it all. And of course, Ian Bremmer, who your listeners know is one of the great authorities on international affairs, head of the Eurasia group, and the Ian Bremmer tweet, the NBA offers a formal statement kowtowing to China and Hong Kong. And just making sure listeners know the chronology, the Houston Rockets general manager tweeted out support for the demonstrators in Hong Kong. The Houston Rockets owner tweeted out he doesn't speak for the Houston Rockets. He's the general manager. And then this formal statement, and then the poor general manager put out his hostage note tweet. But Ian Bremmer says, I'm disgusted. If you care about democracy, freedom, and American values, let the NBA know how you feel.
And I don't know that fans will understand the significance of this, but here I want to return to my central point. When the NBA collapsed, they suggested to China that if they use violence, Americans will not object. That could not be further from the truth. The NBA is overly leveraged in China. Many of us are not, and we would not view it that way. So I really think they've done a disservice to the Hong Kong demonstrators, a terrible disservice in making them more vulnerable than they were before the weekend began.
No, it's a great point and sets a terrible precedent for U.S. companies and how we're going to respond when threatened.
Matt, and then Mike Allen, last thing from this morning's Axios AM. I have talked with Ronan Farrow about his new book, Catch and Kill. I'm fascinated. I cannot wait to read it. I believe it will be provocative and have news stories in it. I have not seen it yet, and I hadn't seen the cover until I got my Axios AM. They've gone very high concept with this cover.
Yeah, so we have a red hand zipping lips, catch and kill from Ronan Farrow, and the NewYorker.com, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, beginning today, 3 installments, excerpts where he talks about how he was surveilled by people hired an Israeli private intelligence agency hired by Harvey Weinstein, and you can't make it up. Who are the operatives who were after him? One of them was named Roman, and the other one was named Igor.
Yeah, I got to ask you, have you met Ronan? Do you know Ronan?
Of course.
I've only met him once, and I found him incredibly smart. I mean, very, very smart. And I believe this book will be very well received on the left and the right because it's going after bad guys, not ideological bad guys, but just bad guys. Let me close with impeachment.
Wait, I have to tell you something. I have to tell you something important about Ronan. Despite being a celebrity, he works it. He is a hard-working reporter. He cracks sources that others have not been able to. And a little story that somebody told me when another reporter approached a key interviewee, they said, I want to talk to Ronan. He's the Bob Woodward of his space.
Relentless. All right, impeachment. I was on with Reverend Al yesterday and made my simple point that the president released his transcript. Why won't Adam Schiff release his? They had a hearing on Thursday in the House. Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, many others say it destroys the idea of a quid pro quo. Instead, they leaked a handful of tweets from an 8-hour hearing. What are they hiding, Mike Allen? Why won't Adam Schiff release the transcript?
Well, Hugh, first of all, when you were on with Reverend Al, you might have made that point 4 times.
I did. I know how to work. I'm not like Ron Johnson. I have a plan.
I'm teasing because you tweeted that you made the point 4 times. But taking that as a jumping off point, a couple of hot impeachment scoops popping on Axios AM. These were in sneak peek by Jonathan Swan, Elena Treen. The president in that phone call with House Republicans on Friday when he blamed poor Rick Perry for the Ukraine call. The president, this was interesting. The president said he didn't even want to make the Ukraine call. That his energy secretary had got him to do it based on something about LNG, liquefied natural gas. One problem, of course, with that, there's no reference to LNG in the transcript. But something else the president said on that call that we just reported, the president keeps being told by his political guys that this is good for him in 2020. But Hugh, you know this. The president doesn't want to be impeached. He knows that it's bad for his legacy, bad in history. So a quote from that House Republican call, the president said impeachment is a bad thing to have on your resume. You don't want it on your resume. But he and others think that if Democrats keep pursuing this, this could lead to a Republican majority. And he said, referring to Kevin McCarthy, he said, but it's going to make Kevin Speaker.
Well, that might very well be the case because it certainly did not work out for Republicans in 1998. Mike Allen, always a pleasure. Follow Mike at Mike Allen. It's a big day in Washington, D.C. It's the first Monday in October. The Supreme Court comes back, and on the first Monday in October, Alliance Defending Freedom is before the Supreme Court today. Now, I am raising money for Alliance Defending Freedom, and I want you to help me. Today, they are arguing in the case of Harris Funeral Homes versus EEOC. Harris Funeral Homes refused to allow a biological male funeral director to wear women's clothing during funerals. Unelected federal bureaucrats at the EEOC are trying to rewrite the 1964 Civil Rights Act to prohibit discrimination against transgendered individuals, or whatever this is the category of. I guess this isn't transgendered. I can't remember. It's LGBTQ issues. ADF has a person, Bob Trent, who notes the courage of the funeral home directors that should inspire us all.
They are standing up for everybody's freedom. They could have made an easy choice and just gone along with what the government was telling them to do and compromise in their beliefs, and they were not willing to do that. I just get a great amount of satisfaction knowing each day that we get to stand along and defend people like that, because what they're doing is an example and protects all of us.
It does protect all of us. Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm going to talk with Kristen Waggoner later in the program. But right now, these Supreme Court cases cost a lot of money. Please donate to ADF. There is a big banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, or you can call my special donation number, 866-700-1060. 866-700-1060. 866-700-1060. They're going to the Supreme Court this week, first Monday in October. Today. They're going to be back there for the first oral argument of the term. Excuse me, it's tomorrow. They're doing it tomorrow. Today is the first day of arguments. Tomorrow is the day that they're arguing Harris Funeral Homes. So please go to the ADF banner at the top of HughHewitt.com and make a gift. It's a great way of showing support for ADF. Great way for showing support. Or you can call 866-700-1060. Let me check the pre-market if I can, brought to you by our friends over at the wonderful people at Birch Gold Group, birchgold.com/Hugh. I got to tell you, by the way, after reading Graham Allison's book, Destined for War, I'm going to increase the share of gold in my holdings. I want Krugerrands, I want Maple Leafs, I want American Eagles to be more in my portfolio than they are right now, and I will buy them from Birch Gold. And the reason is we could have at any given time, Graham Allison has persuaded me, not a conscious decision to end up in a war, but the kind of situation where things spiral unexpectedly, like this NBA spark. And when that happens, gold will soar and stocks will plummet. Birch Gold can protect you against that. They can also protect your 401k or your IRA. Text the word Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747, or go to birchgold.com/Hugh. birchgold.com/Hugh. Oh, relieffactor.com time. Relieffactor.com. Uh-oh. You know what? It's gone. It's gone. My Relief Factor is gone. I've got my
What are
Relief
you
Factor.
talking about?
It's not here. Eskimo Pie Eyes was here over the weekend, wasn't she? I knew it. There it is. She moved it. Oh, she plays tricks with me. There's my relieffactor.com. Thank goodness. I knew she was in here. She left me a mean note. And there it is, my relieffactor.com, which I need because it's a crazy week today. There are my 4 pills from relieffactor.com. And down they go with the Pellegrino Essenza. That's my new drink in the morning other than coffee. Resveratrol, Icarian Curcumin, and Omega. Every day, the natural supplements that keep you in the game, keep you moving forward. $19.95 is the starting point. Go get your relieffactor.com. Come right back. Salena Zito joins me next. What does the Heartland think about the NBA? We'll find out. Stay tuned.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt on this Monday morning, the first Monday in October. The Supreme Court is back today. I'm joined by Salena Zito, still smarting over a loss the Steelers suffered yesterday to the Ravens. Good morning, Salena. How are you?
I'm swell. How are you?
Good. I want the reaction from Yinzerland to what the NBA did to the Hong Kong protesters. Cut them off at the knees, rejected them, and basically sent a signal to the People's Republic of China that no matter what they do in Hong Kong, the NBA will be with the people in Beijing, not the people in the streets of Hong Kong.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen Twitter quite unite people in the way that move did. I mean, to side with the People's Republic of China over the protesters is just ludicrous, and the heavy hand that they put down on the owner was just, it was crazy, and it happened immediately. And no, people do not side with the NBA on this. They look foolish and stupid, and part of the problem that is all throughout our culture and our politics.
Now, it was to me obvious what would happen. Brad Dayspring at Politico noted that these large organizations seem to be politically tone deaf, whether it's big tech or big sports or big anything. They are very woke, but they are not very awake. And do you think it's going to change? Or do liberals run every elite entertainment business in the country?
Yeah, I mean, there's an entire chapter about this in my book with Brad Todd, The Great Revolt. I mean, this is what started this conservative populist coalition, because everything in our culture is run by people who are completely detached from the people that they serve, whether it is through entertainment or through sports. Think about this. When Hoover owned his vacuum company, where did Mr. Hoover live? He lived in the same neighborhood where his factories workers lived, and he went to church with these same people. He understood his customers. Think about the NFL for a second. Where is it located? Park Avenue, New York. Now, what do they have in common with people that go to the games every week and face paint and tailgate and save their money so they can buy these tickets?
And the NBA owners are a billionaires club, like the NFL owners that Mark Leibovich has written about, and they immediately react to the dollar. And I just cannot believe how stupid they are. This is so dangerous for the people in Hong Kong if Beijing gets the message, oh, the NBA will be with us if we pull a Tiananmen Square in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one in a series of these larger entities like the NBA, like the NFL, even like larger companies who, as you said, think on the side of woke politics. They think on the side of the people that live in the same zip code as them, which is, they're millionaires and billionaires. So they don't think on the same side as the common man and woman.
Now,
they're detached.
Does that carry over into politics? Because I also think they do not understand what is going on with impeachment. And that was my transition. Not very elegant, but it's true. I think that the Democrats have completely misjudged their move on impeachment. What do you think, Salena?
Absolutely. It's very heavy-handed, and they are siding on. What they don't understand is that people have this healthy distrust of all things big, as we just talked about, and that includes a lot of these sort of institutions that run our government and that run our media, and they associate the Democratic Party with them because these institutions are typically either filled with people that are part of the Democratic Party or side with the Democratic Party. So this all looks like an attempt since the day that President Trump was President-elect Trump, and they were talking about impeachment. This is just one long story that has never had an end to it, and that's the problem Democrats have.
Okay, quick question, Salena. I was on Al Sharpton yesterday, and I was asked about the Democratic primary, and I said, looks like Elizabeth Warren's going to be their nominee. I think Joe Biden is bleeding out politically. I think Bernie Sanders' heart attack takes him out, and I don't see anyone else coming up. That means Elizabeth Warren. I can't think of a candidate better made to lose Pennsylvania. I really can't. Do you agree with me?
Absolutely. All you have to do is look at the geography of Western Pennsylvania, where fracking is making people's lives better because their communities are healthier, their incomes are better. It's not just manufacturing, but it's also high-tech jobs, chemists, engineers, geologists, artificial intelligence. It's a wide variety of types of jobs. And they are not going to vote for someone who said they're going to ban fracking on day one. And you can't win Pennsylvania as a Democrat if you can't win Western Pennsylvania.
I agree. And they don't know that. I got pushback from Michelle Goldberg, who's a lefty, and they do not understand. I grew up 7 miles from Pennsylvania. I talk to Salena every week. Elizabeth Warren will lose Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. She just will. But the Democrats are going to nominate her anywhere. Salena Zito, always a pleasure. Follow her at Salena Zito on Twitter. Come back for hour number 2 of this Monday morning Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Greetings, everyone. It's Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. A lot of news this morning. The U.S. has agreed with Turkey to pull back from U.S. Kurdish positions along the southern border of Turkey. Turkey is going to bring an offensive to bear on those regions and will take control of the ISIS prisoners therein. Kurds fear a war with Turkey. The United States says we cannot maintain a garrison state there forever. And the president wants out. He announced this in December of last year. It's been 10 months. It is now happening. And Erdogan is coming to the United States. And I hope they make him give up the Russian air defense system so we can sell them F-35s and get them back into NATO. The NBA is feeling a backlash in China, but nothing like the backlash the NBA is getting in the United States after abandoning Hong Kong protesters to whatever happens to them by signaling that they will stand with China no matter what. It's a firestorm in China that's now a firestorm in the United States, and Adam Silver is in trouble. Every NBA executive is in trouble. And the American people do not like the NBA this morning. Indeed, it's made it to the Times of London. Rockets GM Daryl Morey creates China NBA tension with tweet. A lot more than that going on. I loved a story in yesterday's New York Times. Barr and a top prosecutor, John Durham, cast a wide net in reviewing the Russia inquiry. Now, let me explain something to you. I believe Russia attacked our elections in 2016. I believe, and I said it before the election, that Russia used WikiLeaks as a GRU front. And I believe they'd been using WikiLeaks as a GRU front for years. I agreed with Mitt Romney in 2012 when he told Barack Obama our number one threat was Russia, and Barack Obama laughed at him. We've always understood Russia is malign. That does not mean, as Graham Allison points out in his book, Destined for War, that Russia was the only malign actor in 2016. And I do not mean another power, though I can't rule that out. I mean that malign actors in the United States might have used the Russian attack as cover for their own attacks on Donald Trump. And that is what Attorney General Barr and U.S. Attorney John Durham are investigating. They're going around the world to see whether or not the reality of the Russia attack provided cover for anti-Trump extremists at the top of the FBI and maybe elsewhere in the intelligence community to use their enormous powers of surveillance against Team Trump in a way that summons the bad old days of Hoover. I don't know that we're going to find out this week. I hope we find out this week. We need to find out this week. Iraq is spiraling deeper into violence. The country's troops have cracked down on anti-government protests. They turned their guns on the people. 104 people were killed in Iraq this weekend. More than 6,000 wounded. 6 days of street protest clashes with the army, the biggest crisis of modern Iraq, and the biggest one under Prime Minister Mahdi. It's a mess. It's a mess in Baghdad. Boris Johnson telling the EU, get serious about my proposal or we're getting out. The Scottish anti-hard Brexit are trying to get the Scottish Supreme Court to say Boris Johnson will be arrested if he does not give in to their demands. And one of the most politically volatile terms in years begins today, first Monday in October. They're back. The denuclearization talks with North Korea have collapsed, and Joker made $93.5 million in the U.S. and Canada. $93.5 million. I saw it. Did you see Joker, Dwayne? The grimmest movie I've seen in a long time. I understand why Sonny Bunch liked it. It's pretty numbing.
It's a biopic for Sonny Bunch?
It could be a biopic for Sonny Bunch. I don't know, but it is a very, very numbing show. Later this hour, I'm going to be joined by Kristen Waggoner of the Alliance Defending Freedom. Alliance Defending Freedom back in front of the Supreme Court tomorrow. They are going to be arguing whether or not a funeral home is obliged to hire transvestites. When people are there, the plaintiff is arguing that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination against cross-dressers. I believe the larger interpretation is it would also then be interpreted to prohibit discrimination against gays, lesbians, transgendered people. The LGBTQ community sees nothing wrong with interpreting a 1964 law to mean what they want it to mean in 2019. I do. That's not what the courts should do. ADF is there. They're also going to be fighting on in Price Waterhouse versus Hopkins to prohibit an expansion of the rights of employers to employ who they can legally under the 64 Civil Rights Act. Alliance Defending Freedom gets involved with everything. And Harris Funeral Homes is just one case. They do tens of thousands of cases. And they need money from you. Takes a lot of courage to step up. ADF's Bob Trent says the courage of the funeral home director here should inspire all of us.
They are standing up for everybody's freedom. They could have made an easy choice and just gone along with what the government was telling them to do and compromise in their beliefs, and they were not willing to do that. I just get a great amount of satisfaction knowing each day that we get to stand along and defend people like that, because what they're doing is an example and protects all of us.
ADF's track record of winning before the Supreme Court is unparalleled, but pursuing cases like this while offering free legal services to solid Christian businesses like the funeral home costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's where men and women like you come in. As ADF prepares to head back to the Supreme Court tomorrow, we need you to stand with ADF in this and many other critical battles ahead. Your tax-deductible gift right now will keep Alliance Defending Freedom on the job in front of the Supreme Court tomorrow and every day. There's an ADF banner at the top of my homepage at hughhewitt.com. I just tweeted it out. You can click on that ADF banner at hughhewitt.com to make your gift of any amount online, or you can call the special donation number toll-free, 866-700-1060. Help Alliance Defending Freedom as they head to the Supreme Court tomorrow. I want to play for you Rudy Giuliani yesterday on Fox News with Howie Kurtz, being Rudy, cut number 17.
Well, first of all, even if it is pressuring Ukraine, it's a lot different than what Biden did, since the purpose of questioning is to get a criminal investigation about a scandal at the highest level of our government uncovered that the Washington press has been covering up for 3 years deliberately, and about which they are now going after me personally because they want to get me, the messenger, so they don't have to deal with their honey boy Biden, who's been a crook for 30 years. Sorry, I've gone after crooks a lot tougher than him.
Well,
now,
you've prosecuted a lot of crooks when you were U.S. attorney.
Let me explain to you about
I want to
Volcker.
ask you about your general charge. Okay, go ahead on Volcker.
Let me answer about Volcker. My texts, including their internal texts, prove beyond a doubt they reached out for me. I had finished my investigation 5 months earlier. They reached out for me. They asked me to talk to Mr. Yermak. I did it under their direction and control. I reported back to them. I discussed with them. The statement is clearly from the text, their idea, not my idea. They asked me my advice about the text. I didn't tell them he must, he should, he has to, he must. I gave them my advice about what would give everybody comfort that the corrupt Ukrainian government that's been corrupt for a long time was on the right road, that it was willing to root out corruption no matter who it hurt, without fear or favor, the way our agencies should be able to do, but don't.
Rudy, how do
they
you
cover
back
up for Democrats and they go after Republicans?
How do you back
because
up?
we have a corrupt system going on in Washington called the double standard.
Do you back
and if it's
up?
not broken, we're going to continue to have an alienated America. And
Rudy kept going. Cut number 18.
It is. However, the government wasn't doing it. The witnesses who came to me told me a story that still has to come out, which is they tried to get it to the FBI for a year and a half. Remember, we're talking now almost a year ago when I first got this. The Mueller investigation was hot and heavy. They were still going after him. I still needed all the material I could get to defend my client, which, by the way, I should be praised for, because that's what a good lawyer does. I was still worried that they were going to do some kind of a collusion nonsense because I know how corrupt some of those people on Mueller's staff are, like Andrew Weissman. So I had to defend my client. Ukrainians came to me. I didn't go after Joe Biden. They handed it to me. They said there's a lot of evidence of collusion in Ukraine. And by the way, one of the guys involved in getting that evidence cut off is Joe Biden. Do you know what he did? I said, no, I don't know what he did. And then they showed me. They showed me the tape of the 2018 confession that he made in front of the Council on Foreign Relations, which, by the way, if it were a Republican, the Washington press corps, including you, Harry, would have gone crazy. We'd have had 3 months of investigations of that.
Just for
Instead,
the viewers,
what happens with Biden?
You're talking here
they
about
cover it up.
Well,
they cover it up.
I think it's been covered.
Because
I want to get to that.
They are in. No, it's not being investigated. I'll give you an example. ABC. Let me give you an example about what you cover.
Yeah, but, Rudy, when he gets going, he gets rolling. Don't go anywhere, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show is underway.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Lethal Agent, a Mitch Rapp novel by Kyle Mills.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks for listening this morning. Kim Strassel has a new book coming out, Resistance at All Costs. You've got to get it. You got to get it. I'll have her on the show next week when it's available to order. And it gives the complete context for this impeachment nonsense. I was on with Al Sharpton, happy to go on, happy to sit there with Michelle Goldberg and hear her, spin conspiracy theories, misrepresent what Republicans are saying. Republicans are saying that Attorney General Barr and U.S. Attorney John Durham and the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, need to be allowed to file their findings before anyone declares what they think of the 2016 counterintelligence investigation into Donald Trump. Now, we know that Robert Mueller found no collusion. There was no collusion between anyone in America, much less the president, his campaign, or his family, and the Russian attack on our election. But a counterintelligence investigation was open, and it all comes back to the mysterious Professor Mifsud. The mysterious Professor Mifsud it was the New York Times yesterday, met in March of 2016 George Papadopoulos. Then Mifsud goes to Russia a couple times. That might be a false flag, but he went there a couple of times. Shows up in London, meets with George Papadopoulos again, says, the Russians have got a bunch of emails on Hillary. Papadopoulos in May, having drinks with a couple of Aussie diplomats, says, hey, the Russians have got this trove of emails. And a couple of months later, the Australian tell us stuff. And I will tell you right now, it is going to be amazing for one side or the other. I don't know who's going to get. You might find Comey vindicated. You might find Comey, McCabe, and Brennan in the crosshairs. It's why John Brennan was on Meet the Press yesterday with Chuck Todd, taking an extreme position, cut number 19.
I think it's no longer, a democracy if an autocrat has it in his hands. And people like Johnson and others are putty in his hands, which means that the democratic principles upon which this country are founded are eroding right now.
No, it's just silly, eroding. No, we're not. Adam Schiff is eroding confidence in the intel. Let me go back to the Turkey-Syria issue. New York Times is reporting wrongly this morning that the United States is endorsing a proposed Turkish attack into Syria. The United States is not endorsing it. But if Turkey does it, after 2 years of us urging them not to do so, Trump is not going to allow U.S. soldiers to get into a war with Turkey. He is going to allow Turkey to own the ISIS prisoner problem. And he is going to pull back to defensible lines that can be maintained long term. It is that simple. It's been 10 months. I went on the trip with Bolton. I know why Mattis quit. They did not want to undercut the Kurds. We cannot stay there forever. And if there's a war coming between Turkey and the Syrian Kurds, we cannot be in the middle of that. We can't. Do you know how many Americans are in Turkey? We have a base in Turkey. It is a bad move if Turk engages the Kurds in Syria for Turkey. It will cause enormous problems for that country. We cannot be in the middle of it. And the president is not encouraging them. The president is not saying it's fine with us. He is simply getting us out of the way and will not catch American troops in the middle of this. And by the way, if there's a Democrat that wants to garrison Syria, will they step forward and please so declare? If one of them, Joe Biden or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, they're the top three, although Bernie had the heart attack, and I think he's going to be politically wounded. I'm glad he's okay, but he's going to be politically wounded. Joe Biden is bleeding out as well because of his son, Hunter. So it's really, Elizabeth Warren, what do you think we should do in Syria? Should we plan on building forts there? Should we build a giant Bagram Air Force base in northern Syria? No, I don't think so. So after 10 months, I went with John Bolton to Israel and Turkey when this began. It's been 10 months. This is not a surprise. We are not endorsing what Turkey did. But I got to tell you, after 10 months, you got to do something. Coming up after the break, Brad Smith of Microsoft and I talking about the challenges of the tech world. His brand new book is Tools and Weapons. Don't go anywhere. I'll keep you posted on breaking news. As we continue this morning, it's another week of impeachment, another week of the Democrats' case falling apart right here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hugh-niverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hugh-niverse.com.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks so much for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Brad Smith is the president of Microsoft, their chief legal officer, and my guest on Friday at the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda. We had a great conversation. I talked to him earlier about his book, Tools and Weapons, which I think is vital in this age where cybersecurity is every day and everywhere an issue. It's an issue in the investigation into Russia. It's an issue in the investigation of FBI, CIA, intelligence community wrongdoing, if there was any. And here's the rest of my conversation with Brad Todd. I love the chapter on El Paso and how the data centers there are bilingual. I think that was an eye-opener for me. But if I can stay for a moment, and I hope you write down Warren, Ohio, or Youngstown, Warren, an industrial policy within the kingdom of tech. And that's a phrase I got from Tools and Weapons in my mind. There is a kingdom of tech, and there are about 25 to 30 companies in that kingdom of tech. If the kingdom or the nation state of tech actually developed an industrial policy, it would not put HQ2, Amazon's new facility, in Alexandria, Virginia. It would plop it in Youngstown. It would not reproduce itself on the coasts. It would spread throughout, like actually Google did in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Do you ever get together with your counterparts, Brad Smith, and say, let's actually work together, not in a way that is anti-competitive and violates the laws? You know that drill. I got the full readout in Tools and Weapons. You fought that fight. But let's work together to make sure tech is everywhere and benefiting every American.
We do more than we used to do to sit down together, and I think that's a good thing. We don't yet do as much as we need to do. This book, in part, is for everyone who wants to understand where technology is going, but it also is a special appeal, if you will, to the other tech companies. It really calls for the need for us to be more collaborative, to take the broad kinds of public initiatives that you're describing. I think that's the only way we're going to start to just do better than we have over the last decade or two in spreading the benefits of technology more broadly.
You know, I thought this book had a subtext to other tech people. I thought that. I wrote it down many places. You know what the most interesting admission in this book is? Has anyone else told you what the most interesting admission is from a center-right perspective? Is when
I would love to hear yours. Yeah.
We were on the wrong side of history. I made a note. That's what you write in this book. We were on the wrong side of history when it comes to wanting to hold on to what was yours and proprietary as opposed to sharing it. And I thought, I don't know of a public figure who has ever admitted we were on the wrong side of history. It's a first, Brad Smith.
Well, we wanted to use the book actually make those kinds of statements. I do think it's unfortunate we live in a world where it seems so hard for people to admit that they've learned. And one of the things that we've really championed at Microsoft is a culture that we used to sort of think of as a know-it-all culture and turn it into a learn-it-all culture. And I think that opened the door for us to say, hey, we've learned in that instance, yes, we've learned that we can share technology. We've learned that that is actually fundamental for a world that's driven by data, because we need to share data to pursue a cure for cancer or just about any advance. But I appreciate your comment, because at the end of the day, technology is great. It still starts with people, and people have to learn, and people have to be comfortable saying, hey, you know what? I didn't get everything right in life. No one ever does.
Well, now, lest people think this is all rose petals and champagne. It's not. I have one problem I want to talk to you about. There used to be ABC News would put out The Note. It was published by the now in disrepute Mark Halperin about the Gang of 500. That's the 500 policymakers in Washington that actually run everything. When I read Tools and Weapons, I became concerned that there's a Gang of 500 in tech. I was not happy with your description of the reception given to President Xi Jinping when he came to Seattle, because it seemed to me that when all of tech gathers, America sees an oligarchy of wealth and influence that's not elected and not accountable. Now, you talk about the need for transparency and accountability, but is that self-awareness out there of what the rest of America thinks about the Valley plus Microsoft up in Washington?
I think it is to some degree. I think it's probably an area where we all benefit from listening more, learning more. One of the points we make, one of my favorite chapters in the book, frankly, is about rural broadband. That's one of the things we touch upon. We describe sitting down with the mayor of Republic, Washington, a town of just over 1,000 people, at the Knotty Pine Diner and having lunch. And, I think you have to get out and listen to people. And it is true, what you hear is that people feel that tech has left them behind. They feel that the economy has left them behind. And I do think transparency is fundamental. We do need to meet with the leaders of the world, even if we're not necessarily enthusiastic about what they're doing in a particular day or year. But we have to be transparent, and more importantly, we have to connect with the communities in our own country and keep learning from them.
Now, let me give a compliment. I'll go back and forth between compliments and critiques. Your section on AI begins with, I think, a marvelous passage about how people in a room are sometimes embarrassed to say, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. And that half the room will have no idea what AI or blockchain or something means, but they don't want to be embarrassed. Now, I'm in the business where I always say, I have no idea what you're talking about, because I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's what the audience is thinking. And you can't leave your audience behind. They'll turn you off. Say, what the hell are you talking about? But I do believe that your effort here, because you are a lawyer, is much more effective than most tech people, because I don't know if you've ever presented to a jury, but you got to break it down for the dumbest member of the jury, right?
In a lot of ways, my role at Microsoft for so many years has been to be the non-tech person in the room. I still remember when I started at the company, it was 26 years ago, and I thought I was reasonably smart until my first day of work. And then I listened to everybody use these acronyms and jargon, and I spent 3 months going, oh, my gosh, I don't have a clue. And so I've always tried to play the role of bringing the technical topics and making them approachable to people, and the book, in a sense, was an extension of that.
Now, talk to me a little bit about the one thing that, now I want to go to a critique. It's actually scary. It's not so much a critique. It's scary. A chat box named, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Giosi? Is Giosi? Jawai. I looked at that and I said, OMG. And then Tay, I found it amusing from a lawyer's perspective that Taylor Swift's, hello, I'm Taylor Swift's lawyer letter came to you. But as a grandparent, just recently a grandparent, I'm thinking, whoa, Nellie, revealing my age at 63. What are kids doing chatting to bots? What could go wrong there?
Well, lots of things could go wrong there, obviously. First of all, we really did try to bring artificial intelligence to life so people could understand what it is and where it's going and why it works the way it does. but then we tried to address these social and societal aspects. And that story is an interesting one.
Explain it, please, what it is, because I don't want to leave my audience behind.
It basically was developed by researchers in China at Microsoft there, and it's a bot, a chat bot. It's basically an automated service that you can talk to. And if you think about Alexa, you ask it a question. You have Siri, you ask it a question. Well, instead of just asking a question, people have conversations about their day. And the thing that amazed us in China was that young people in particular would have conversations that would last 10, 15, 20 minutes. In some ways, as we speculated in the book, perhaps in a country where people don't tend to have siblings, they're looking for this kind of companionship. And what it really points to, it's why we actually talk about it in the book, is it just shows how important it is to have a clear sense of ethics, design principles, if you will, when you create this kind of technology. That service is now being used by more than 600 million people, mostly in Asia, and not just in China anymore. So whenever you create technology that has that kind of impact, you have to sort of start before you even write the first line of code and ask, what are we trying to create? How is it going to be used? How do we ensure that the impact is one that parents and grandparents are going to feel good about, and not just a kid who discovers it and sees it as something new and different?
And Brad Smith, let's close on this and cover more detail at Nixon. 600 million children talking to a device that can retain and indeed segregate, identify patterns, and if there was a Stasi in the country, I found your visit to Stasi headquarters to be very moving. What that worries me about, it's so Orwellian. That must haunt you. What that never goes away if it's stored by governments, right?
I think what you just posed is one of the fundamental questions of our time. Because tech companies every day are creating products, and everybody creates them thinking, I'm going to make the world a better place. But when technology is put in the wrong hands, it can do horrible things. And the technology that is being created around the world today is creating the basis for an authoritarian state with the kinds of powers that George Orwell warned about 70 years ago in his book, 1984. And so we have to think about this. We need strong human rights, ethics, principles for the industry. We need, in our view, the democratic governments of the world to stand up to ensure that democratic freedoms continue. And unfortunately, in the 21st century, that actually means recognizing that these tools that the tech sector has created can be turned into weapons, especially when they're being used by governments that have very different values than ours.
Especially when children are involved. We'll leave it there. I'm going to post our conversation today and our conversation from the Nixon Library and encourage everyone to read Tools and Weapons. Not many books about tech are accessible to non-tech people. Tools and Weapons is, and it's really eye-opening. Brad Smith, congratulations, and to your co-author, Carol Ann Brown. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
I often recommend a lot of books. Recently I had on Kyle Mills, the new author of the Vince Flynn Lethal Agent book. It's a Mitch Rapp thriller by Kyle Mills. And we talked about thrillers and everything. I often talk with authors, and I really, really loved Lethal Agent. But that's fiction. What Brad Smith has written, Tools and Weapons, is the reality. And I have been listening to Graham Allison's book about our competition with China, and I realize America has to be figured out soon what we are going to do about Asia. And I kind of view the decision of President Trump concerning our troops in Syria. He has not endorsed a Turkish invasion. That's simply wrong. That's not what he did. He has not endorsed a Turkish invasion, but he is pulling back American troops in Syria to defensible lines, to a smaller perimeter, and he is going to not get in the middle of a battle if one erupts between Turks and Kurds. Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. Not very different from the 1991 decision of George H.W. Bush not to come to the aid of the Marsh Arabs in Iraq. It can be harsh, but sometimes great powers have to act with reality in mind. Let me tell you about ReliefFactor.com. Sometimes people who hurt should be acting with relief in mind and not with over-the-counter, not with prescription drugs. Don't stop taking prescription drugs if you've been prescribed them, please. But do consider ReliefFactor.com, the all-natural supplement. Go and get it, please. $19.95 for 3 weeks. Give it a try. Be like tens of thousands of people like me who take it every morning. I did on the show in the first hour. I do every single day I'm on the air. I do on the weekends. I continue to do so whenever I'm hurting. And I cannot encourage you enough to give it a try. That's it. 3-week starter pack, $19.95. Join the people who get relief every single day from ReliefFactor.com. I'm coming back with Kristen Waggoner of the Alliance Defending Freedom. And I encourage you to go over to HughHewitt.com, find the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, and support them. They go to the Supreme Court tomorrow on a big case. They need your help. Stay tuned.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns for break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, now joined by Kristen Waggoner of the Alliance Defending Freedom. She is the senior counsel there. You can follow her at K Waggoner ADF. Good morning, Kristen. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great, Hugh.
Big day at the Supreme Court tomorrow for not only Alliance Defending Freedom, but Harris Funeral Homes. Tell us about the case.
Well, it's a family-owned funeral home. They've been serving grieving families in the Detroit area for about 100 years. They have a professional dress code that they've abided by to ensure that their employees are essentially blending into the background and that they're focusing on families that are in the greatest time of need. The dress code prohibits tattoos and ensures they're wearing dark clothes, no flashy jewelry or hair, and is sex-specific. In 2007, a biological man was hired as the funeral director, being the front face to be working with the grieving families and greeting guests, and he agreed to abide by that dress code. But 6 years later, told Tom Ross, the funeral home's owner, that the employee would want to begin dressing and presenting as a woman at work. Tom Ross considered the different competing interests that he had of his other employees, of Stevens, the employee, and the grieving families, and determined that that wasn't going to work. The EEOC then decided to make this a test case to try to change the definition of sex discrimination under federal law to include transgender status. And now we're at the Supreme Court.
Title VII was passed in 1964. There is simply no way that the Congress of 1964 intended its protections to apply to transvestites, transgendered status, LGBTQ issues of any sort. Not a prayer that they did so. So you're not only fighting for the funeral home, you're fighting for the court's approach to statutes. Are you not, Kristen?
That is the heart of this case. The case law has said what you look at is what would the public have understood the law to mean, the term sex to mean, at the time the statute was enacted. It's not what Congress had in its mind, and it's not how someone might understand it today. It's in 1964, what did sex mean to the public?
And I cannot believe that the court will not side with you. I don't know how you lose other than an ideologically driven justice. But I want people to understand, since I've been appealing for funds for Alliance Defending Freedom all month, how long has this case been going on and what does it cost?
Oh, it's gone on for many years, including now through two administrations, because this started under the Obama administration, and as I said, the EEOC took a different position that it is taking now. Now the EEOC has sided under us, and the United States is coming in on our side. But, Hugh, I think something else, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of money to put these cases forward. But the other thing I think is important to bring out is sex discrimination also requires not only that you are taking into account whether someone is biologically male or female, but you also need to prove that one sex is treated worse than the other. And you certainly don't have that here, as all men and women are required to abide by the dress code.
And it is clearly, I think it's an easy win, but there are many other cases. If it goes the other way, if this case is lost, if Alliance Defending Freedom had not brought it, one could see every sort of 1964 Act application of the ban on discrimination between men and women applied across the board, across the United States.
Well, I think it's important to look at the drastic and widespread repercussions, and we'll be raising those with the court tomorrow. If you think about Title IX and the equal opportunity for women that it's supposed to provide, we're literally working with clients in Connecticut where high school girls have lost out because two boys are competing against them, and they've been displaced from 15 state championships in just a couple of years. Or, you know, Hugh, we've talked about the shelter in Anchorage, Alaska, where Anchorage has taken the position that this shelter must admit biological men into the women's shelter to sleep 3 feet away from women who have been sex trafficked and experienced domestic violence. And I haven't even started with the privacy implications. I have a student who's been caught undressed in a locker room, turns around to see another student of a different biological sex also undressed. And there are implications to healthcare providers, and certainly, as you know, the pronoun issue, compelled speech. It goes on and on.
Who's going to argue this tomorrow for ADF, Kristen?
John Bursch is going to argue it. He's our VP of Appellate Advocacy and the former Solicitor General of Michigan.
Terrific choice. And I just want to say people are praying for you, but I want them also to contribute to you. And Kristen, it is a case on Tuesday morning. I hope you come back and tell me on Wednesday how the argument went so that we can find out, or John can join me. Are you going to be in the courtroom?
Yes, I am. We're working hard to get there and looking forward to the day.
Thank you. And I want to close by asking everyone out there, these are important cases. Please go over to HughHewitt.com. The banner is at the top. It's at the very top of HughHewitt.com. Or you can call right now, 866-700-1060. 866-700-1060. Alliance Defending Freedom headed to the Supreme Court again tomorrow. They are 9-0 over the past, I think, 3 years. 9-0. They don't lose when they go up there. Pray that they don't lose tomorrow. It is Congress's job to do this, not the Supreme Court's job to change the law, because they think the culture has changed. Huge case tomorrow. Enormous case, and Alliance Defending Freedom brought it, and you ought to support them. 866-700-1060. I'll be right back. America Hour number 3 of the Hugh Hewitt Show straight ahead.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break. 5 seconds.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Breaking news from the President of the United States, who has been on Twitter on many issues. The President is tweeting. First thread. The United States, writes the President, was supposed to be in Syria for 30 days. That was many years ago. We stayed and got deeper and deeper into the battle with no aim in sight. When I arrived in Washington, ISIS was running rampant in the area. We quickly defeated 100% of the ISIS caliphate, including capturing thousands of ISIS fighters, mostly from Europe. But Europe did not want them back and said, you keep them, USA. I said, no, we did you a great favor and you want us to hold them in U.S. prisons at tremendous cost. They are yours for trials. They again said no, thinking as usual that the U.S. is always the sucker on NATO, on trade, on everything. The Kurds fought with us, but were paid massive amounts of money and equipment to do so. They have been fighting Turks for decades. I held off this fight for almost 3 years, but it is time for us to get out of these ridiculous, endless wars, many of them tribal, and bring our soldiers home. We will fight where it is to our benefit and only fight to win. And Turkey, Europe, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Russia, and the Kurds will now have to figure the situation out and what they want to do with the captured ISIS fighters in their neighborhood. They all hate ISIS, have been enemies for years. We are 7,000 miles away and will crush ISIS again if they come anywhere near us. Right? That is the president this morning. That's not all of the president this morning. He's also tweeted about two other matters. We just won the big court case on net neutrality rules, a great win for the future and speed of the internet. Will lead to many big things, including 5G. Congratulations to the FCC and its chairman, Ajit Pai. He's right. And then he tweeted 3 minutes ago, caps, IG, declassified information contradicts the whistleblower, Fox and Friends. But why are people surprised? The partisan whistleblower was very wrong on what he said on my perfect no-pressure call with the Ukrainian president. Bring in another whistleblower from the bench. Donald Trump this morning. You know, I went with John Bolton. The Syria situation is so freaking complicated. I will try and explain it to you again. Jonah Goldberg and Josh Kraushaar are tweeting my tweets from December of last year when I opposed the precipitous decision to withdraw. Since that time, I have followed the situation closely. I know where the Kurds are. I've tried to study the maps. I know what we've been trying to do. I went with John Bolton to Jerusalem and to Ankara. I know that Turks are very difficult to deal with this. They stiffed Bolton in Ankara. They stiffed Joe Dunford in Ankara. But we have persevered for 10 months. We've done joint patrols with them. And in that entire time, no European country, not one, stepped up to take back their ISIS terrorist fighters. Turkey will take them. We are also have been doing joint patrols with the Turks. There need not be a massive war here. But if one is going to come, it cannot be forever postponed. We can't end up with another Kosovo Fort Bonsall on our hands. Do you know we're still in Kosovo with 10,000 Americans? Did you know that? We got 10,000 American troops deployed in Kosovo. They have been there since, I believe, 1999, 20 years. We are not going to do that. We're doing that in Iraq. We have a lot of bases in Iraq. In Iraq, by the way, 104 people shot by the military this weekend. It's fallen apart. This is not Kurdistan in Iraq. This comes after 10 months of preparation. I know the Kurds are upset. They are our allies. They ought to be upset with Europe. We are not bolting the entire region. We are not doing what was originally proposed. Turkey, we do not know what they are doing. We do know the Kurds will fight them if they come too close to their encampments. We're not going to be in the middle of it. and Turk, the New York Times headline that Trump endorses this is just flat out wrong. He doesn't. He would prefer that the Turks leave the Kurds alone. It is unclear whether the Turks will do that, and we cannot stay there forever. We gave them 10 months warning. President listened the first time around. I went with Bolton. I know the talks. I know what's going on, and Erdogan is coming here, and we have a huge problem with China. And I know I talk a lot about China on this program, and it probably bores some of you, but I cannot. I talked to the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, about China at the Nixon Library on Friday. I read about it constantly. Dr. Kissinger's on China. Graham Allison's Destined for War. We're doing a big conference in Washington, D.C. on October the 17th about the state of the relationship between U.S. and PRC. It's why I'm upset with the NBA this morning. I understand a few things, realities about China. China hates interference with their internal affairs. Hong Kong is an internal affair with external commitments. Hong Kong undertook external commitments to the United States to the Great Britain about freedom in Hong Kong. There is an attempt to undermine those. Therefore, the U.S. is very carefully communicating to China in a way that does not challenge their sovereignty or the one country, two systems policy, that it must be very careful. Another huge strategic error by China last week, when Carrie Lam, maybe the least competent Chinese executive I've ever seen, she's behind the original extradition treaty, ordered an emergency power not used since Hong Kong was returned to China via the treaty with the United Kingdom, ordered no Hong Kong person wear a face mask. They had violence all weekend long. In the middle of this bubbling cauldron of controversy, the NBA stumbles in. I do not criticize the GM of the Houston Rockets, who tweeted support for the freedom-loving people of Hong Kong, which I think we have to reiterate and reiterate and reiterate. We cannot stop the Chinese from doing whatever they want to do there. No one is going to war over Hong Kong. It will cause a massive breach between the West and the East if they use violence in Hong Kong. I believe the NBA sent the wrong signal to China yesterday about what will happen if they use violence in Hong Kong. It looks like, if you think the NBA represents American business interests, it looks like American business interests will shrug their shoulders if the People's Liberation Army Police, PLAP, move in and mow down the Hong Kong demonstrators. If the NBA is representative of every other American business, there would be no repercussions. That's not true. It will be horrific blowback for China. Horrific blowback for China. And it will be a recession in China. It might be a recession in the United States. You know, I told you at the beginning of the show, I'm going to increase my holdings in gold with birchgold.com/Hugh. They're a sponsor of the show. They're not paying for this. They're not paying me to say this. I'm going to go and buy gold one because this situation has me worried. And the NBA made me more worried this weekend. President Xi Jinping is supposed to be one of the smartest people in office ever. But he needs good information flows. The NBA sent him the wrong signal. If the bottom falls out of everything, you're going to want some gold. If you want some gold, go to birchgold.com/Hugh. Or text the word Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Birchgold.com. Because it's going to get, if they hit Hong Kong. Meanwhile, John Brennan on Meet the Press. By the way, I saw Ron Johnson yesterday. Ron's a friend of mine. You know, media training for some Republicans would be good. It's not hard to do Meet the Press. I did Al Sharpton yesterday for 2 long segments. It's not hard to do media if you keep your cool. That's all you have to do is keep your cool and not lash out and answer the question asked, but include first, usually, answer the question asked first and then make your point. Don't attack the media. Chuck got angry. Ron got mad. It was all unnecessary. It did not advance the ball. Here's the ball. The ball is Barr is into something. I don't know what Barr and Durham are doing, but I'm going to wait to see what it is before I comment on it, unlike most of the Democrats who are scared to death that they have found wrongdoing. I don't know what the Inspector General Horowitz of the Department of Justice has found, but I'm going to wait to see what he writes. I'm not going to jump off a deep end with anybody until I read it, because the Mueller report was oversold for a year by Democrats as going to be the impeachment cookbook. They were going to indict Donald Trump's family and Donald Trump's campaign, and Mueller slinked away. They gave up. They abandoned ship. There isn't even a Democrat talking about an impeachable offense out of the Mueller inquiry for 2 years. And all along I said, trust Special Counsel Mueller. President Trump, if you did nothing wrong, just trust him. It was agonizing. It was slow. It's now agonizing and slow with the Inspector General Horowitz investigating the FISA abuse. It's slow with Attorney General Barr and U.S. Attorney Durham. But facts will out. Stand by for more. I'm coming right back, America. Stay tuned. It is The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Jim Jordan on ABC News with This Week with George Stephanopoulos yesterday, talking about, you know it, Hunter Biden, cut number 13.
Because I'm telling you what he said. I think his point was highlighting that when you're the president of the United States and you see something like this happen, China, he knows, is not going to investigate. He's just pointing out to the American people what they all think about.
It's not to believe what we see with our own eyes right there.
You're telling me the guy who's been tougher on China really thinks that's going to happen? It's not going to happen. He is highlighting what I think so many.
Whether or not it's going to happen, he's
George,
asking
let me ask
for
you
it to
this.
happen.
Let me ask you this.
He's asking for it to happen.
Let me ask you this.
It is clear.
Why did Hunter Biden get the special deal with Burisma in Ukraine? Why? Because he was an expert in Ukraine? Because he was an expert in energy?
You're throwing out the.
Why did Hunter Biden get the special deal that he got in China?
He didn't.
The president is pointing out what so many Americans see. That looks unfair. That looks like something smells about that.
So you're throwing out the charges that have been discredited about the Biden.
No, I'm not throwing any charges. I'm not throwing out any charges.
You're not answering the question. Is it right for the president to ask the Chinese to investigate?
George, first of all, I'm not throwing out any charges. I'm just asking.
You just did.
No, I'm not. I'm asking the fundamental question. Why did Hunter Biden get the deal?
Is the question.
I don't
know.
know.
That is the question. And then he went on to say what happened in Thursday's House Intelligence Committee hearing. Listen very carefully to this. It's cut number 15. He's talking with George Stephanopoulos about the recently resigned special envoy to Ukraine, Volker.
Ambassador Volker told us exactly the opposite. He said there was no quid pro quo, no linkage to any investigation and the security assistance money. But this is Adam Schiff's partisan and unfair process that he's going through, releasing selective text. Why doesn't he release the whole transcript?
Well,
why don't we know?
I asked Hakeem Jeffries that exact question.
I appreciate you doing that, but the real question is, why don't you ask Adam Schiff, why won't he do it? The president released the call. Unprecedented. He released a call with a foreign leader. That hasn't been done very often, maybe not before, but why won't Adam Schiff do the same thing with why there were 67 pages of text messages? Why just a few handfuls selected, highlighted by the Democrats? The same Democrat staff who, by the way, met with this whistleblower before he even filed the complaint, and Adam Schiff wouldn't tell us that. The same Adam Schiff who did the false statement at the start of the hearing a week ago. The same Adam Schiff who met with Michael Cohen. His staff met with Michael Cohen for 10 hours before Michael Cohen testified. Why won't this is, and I think Americans see this.
And I asked Congressman Jeffries about Adam Schiff as well. You talk about Ambassador Volker. He seems to undercut your entire premise on this question of Joe Biden with something he said also on Thursday. Let me put that up right here. I have known former Vice President Biden for 24 years, and the suggestion that he would be influenced in his duties as vice president by money for his son simply has no credibility to me. I know him as a man of integrity and dedication to our country. That seems to undercut the entire premise of what you're talking about.
No, it reinforces it, because Mr. Volker's entire testimony on Thursday said that there was no, he said we conducted ourselves in the highest professional manner. Everyone involved. Mr. Volker is the special envoy to Ukraine. He knows more about this subject area than anyone. And he understood that Zelensky was different. And his whole focus was to get Zelensky and President Trump together. And he knew when they got together, they would hit it off. There would be a connection. And that in the end, the best interest of the United States and the best interest of Ukraine would be served. And throughout that process, he was very clear. And this is why it's so wrong of what chairmanship is doing by not releasing the full transcript and giving you and the media the full context, and more importantly, the American people the full context, because he said throughout that process there was never any quid pro quo. And when Sondland made his statement, George, the EU ambassador, Ambassador Sondland, made his statement, where he said, it's crystal clear, Bill, there is no quid pro quo of any kind. When he made that text message, you guys you never highlight that one. When he made that, you know what Ambassador Volker told us about that text message? He said, we knew that was the truth, and he was speaking for us all, and that had been the case throughout the negotiations.
The fact that Volker's testimony has not been released is dispositive. If there was any quid pro quo, and he admitted to it, you would have seen the testimony released. In fact, he denied it repeatedly, persuasively, conclusively. And there is no impeachable offense. It doesn't exist. It does not exist. You've got the transcript of the Trump call. You don't have the transcript of the hearing. Who's hiding something? Adam Schiff is hiding something. Take it to the bank. Adam Schiff is hiding something. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Thank you so much. Time for the pre-market report brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com are Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. Andrew and Todd are lenders of money. They are not a call center. They're not some scam that popped up on the radio. They've been sponsors of this show for 5 years. I've known Andrew Del Rey for 23 years. I've known Todd Avakian for 7. Andrew and I were in a Bible study together. AndrewandTodd.com did my loan when I moved to Washington. They redid my loan when I moved inside of Washington. They've handled my family, my friends, and the listeners of this show with great honesty, integrity, and speed. They never give you bad advice. They always tell you what is the best deal for you, 15, 20, 30-year mortgage, refinance, new home, condo. They give you the best advisors. If you're taking money out to save it for college because interest rates are low right now, if you're taking money out to build your house, they will help you find a contract. They'll help you do anything. Mostly they'll get you a realtor if you want to buy a house, but you got to go to AndrewandTodd.com and fill out a couple of questions or call them at 888-888-1172. The Dow had a great day on Friday. It was up 372 points. NASDAQ was up 110, S&P up 41. The world was a more stable place on Friday. Everything's a little bit red this morning. The S&P is down 6, the NASDAQ is down 15, the Dow is down 41. All right, that's where we are. Gold is at $1,504 an ounce. Light crude is up a little bit at 53. The 10-year Treasury, on which your interest rates will be based. You don't get the 10-year Treasury. That's what they pay you if you buy a 10-year Treasury bond, is at 1.54%. Interest rates remain at these. This is like a window in history to buy a house on a 30-year loan. It's a window in history. So go and help your kids do that. AndrewandTodd.com. Now, I was on Politics Nation with MSNBC yesterday with Al Sharpton twice. First, I just kept pointing out again and again and again, Adam Schiff won't release the transcript from Thursday. You know who's hiding something. Then at the end of the show, we came back along with Michelle Goldberg of the New York Times and Al Sharpton to talk about where the Democrats are right now after a crazy week. Cut number 2.
As the impeachment inquiry into President Trump's abuses of power continues, 2020 candidates will have to thread the needle while campaigning with voters. According to a recent USA Today poll, a plurality of Americans now say they approve of impeachment. But is that all voters want to hear about? Back with me, New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg and conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt. Michelle, obviously this impeachment inquiry has sucked a lot of the air out of the room in terms of media time. How will it affect the primary races for the Democrats? And if there is, in fact, an impeachment, how will it affect, in your opinion, the 2020 race?
Well, I think that the biggest losers of the impeachment inquiry so far in the primary are some of the kind of second-tier candidates who are really struggling to get oxygen and attention. It just makes it that much harder to break through, even though there could be a possible opportunity. I mean, I think it's completely... I don't want Joe Biden to be the nominee, and I've been pretty open about that, but it's like scandalous.
I read your column.
Right, but
I kind of got that impression.
It is scandalous and obscene the way these lies are being deployed against him. Whether they're going to be effective or not, I feel like I can't judge, but that could potentially be a boon to some of the other candidates, even though I don't think any candidate wants to win the primary that way.
How do you feel that this will affect the election? As in putting on your hat, you and I may disagree on politics, but you're one of the smart analysts and observers of politics in this country, no doubt about it. How does this affect, as an outsider looking at the Democratic primaries, who may win that nomination, if at all? And if the president is impeached, how will it affect the 2020 election, general election?
Well, thank you, Al, for the kind words. I think you've got happy birthday cheer overflowing in your cup there. I appreciate that. I want to take the opportunity to agree with Michelle. That's rare. She's right. The people who were low in the polls can't get any oxygen. The person I thought was going to run away with this, Kamala Harris, can't get back on the stage while impeachment is sucking the air out. I'm glad that Senator Sanders is feeling fine, but I think the heart attack is going to take a lot of steam out of his campaign. I had never heard of Hunter Biden getting $50,000 a month until the whistleblower from a Ukrainian oil and gas magnate who is corrupt. I had not heard of that until the whistleblower put his complaint out there, or her, and therefore I think he is bleeding out as well politically. That means Elizabeth Warren, unless something happens, Elizabeth Warren will lose Pennsylvania, she'll lose Michigan, she'll lose Wisconsin. She's made for Donald Trump to beat her. I think the Democrats have to start looking at Secretary Clinton, because Elizabeth Warren is Secretary Clinton without the experience, the humor, the wisdom, the self-awareness. And they're asking for a replay and worse than 2016. I just wonder if Secretary Clinton isn't thinking what Mitt Romney almost did in 2016, which is third time's a charm.
Michelle, you're kind of frowning.
I know of no Democrat who is eager for a rerun of Hillary Clinton's campaign. I think it would get no traction whatsoever. All of the polls right now, with the caveat that polls this far out are not predictive, and Hillary Clinton was certainly running away with it versus Donald Trump this far out. All of the polls show Elizabeth Warren beating Donald Trump in those three states. And as the idea that she is kind of less viable than Hillary Clinton, she, in some ways, in some surface ways, they're similar. But she is a populist. She certainly doesn't have the baggage of having been too friendly to Wall Street, of having been too cozy with plutocrats. And so I think that there are a lot of Democrats who are coming around to the idea that that kind of Joe Biden's electability argument is falling apart a little bit. And her electability argument is getting stronger because she is running against corruption.
Let me ask you this, Hugh. We've never in American history had an impeached president run for re-election. If, in fact, the House impeaches him and we are into the 2020 race, we don't know if the Senate moves forward with a trial, how long that would be. Are you at all concerned that an impeached president running for re-election could be a problem for Mr. Trump?
I am not, Al, for the simple reason Al Gore was in essence Bill Clinton's third term, and he almost won. He botched that race as well as Secretary Clinton botching 2016. But that impeachment of Bill Clinton did not rub off on Al Gore. I do believe the 1998 off-year elections were an impeachment referenda on a bad impeachment, and the Republicans were punished. Newt Gingrich was thrown out of the speakership. And I believe, unlike 1974, when Republicans were drubbed at the polls in the aftermath of the resignation of President Nixon, that this is up in the air. It's a jump ball. And it will remain a jump ball until we see everything, including U.S. Attorney Durham's report, until we understand what Hunter Biden did for whom and for what reason, until we have the binary choice before us of Donald Trump versus a Democrat. That's what we need.
Michelle, maybe I heard it wrong, but did I hear Hewitt say that Al Gore was the winner in 2000?
Right, and I think that
took 19 years for us to get you to say that
Al Gore
won that election.
Right, Al Gore won that election in the same way that Hillary Clinton won the election.
That's why you ought to watch Politics Nation. Right. Anything could happen.
In the same way that Hillary Clinton won the election in 2016.
2.8 million votes.
I think that, look, it's all revisionist history. I don't see any evidence that Al Gore was helped by impeachment. In fact, his efforts to distance himself from Bill Clinton, who was both enormously popular and enormously controversial, probably hurt him. And also, let's go back to the aftermath of the Bill Clinton impeachment. I think people now seem to think that that Republicans got this utter drubbing in that midterm election. They lost 4 seats.
Yeah, I got to go. Thank you,
That's how you do it. Now, I play that for you so you can hear, how do you handle a Democrat on TV? Answer their question. Listen to him. Chuck Todd's not a Democrat, by the way. He is a very accomplished host. Ron Johnson walked into that and was belligerent. Don't be belligerent. I mean, there's a guy, I can't give you his name. He's the best media trainer in town, sits down with Republicans occasionally and teaches them, don't be belligerent. Be calm. Know what you want to say, smile, try and agree when you can, and have a point to drive home. I pointed out that Elizabeth Warren is Hillary Clinton without the experience, wisdom, and good humor. All right? Hillary Clinton almost won Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Warren's going to get crushed in Pennsylvania. And if Bernie Sanders drops out, as a lot of people think he will after his heart attack, he says he's fine, says he's moving forward, but a lot of people think, nah, that's not going to work. You can't be 78 years old and have a heart attack. Ike pulled it off in 56. Ike had a heart attack in 55, but he was Ike. He was Eisenhower. Bernie Sanders is not Ike. And I think you're just going to see his support melt away. I think the Hunter Biden scandal has totally destroyed Joe Biden's momentum. I didn't know about Hunter Biden until the whistleblower came forward. Thank you, whistleblower. I think impeachment is blowing up in their hands. I just see the world differently than do my friends on the left. And I might be wrong. But you know what I'm waiting for this week? I'm waiting for Attorney General Barr and John Durham to come up with something. I've been waiting for it for weeks. Waiting for Horowitz since June. The Inspector General of the Department of Justice. I wait and I wait and I wait. But in the meantime, understand this about the president's decision on Turkey. I went to Israel and Turkey with John Bolton in January. I did not like the president's precipitous decision in December of last year. I did not like the idea that no one had been thinking about it. No one had prepared for it. Everyone's had 10 months. 10 months. Now, the SDF, which are the Kurds in Syria, say we've surprised them, that they took down their defenses. I don't know whether or not to believe that. I don't think so. I think you'd have to be really, really foolish not to have followed what the U.S. has been saying about these ISIS prisoners and demanding that Europe take them, and they have not taken them, and not listen to Donald Trump say we have to pull back. And do you know why? Because our number one challenge is China, China, China. Doesn't have to be a war with China, but we have to reorient. We just have to. Terrorism is our number 2 problem, and there is a worry that ISIS will come back. I doubt that. But we have forces in Iraq if that were to be the case. We're not going to let ISIS go running rampant like Barack Obama did. We're not going to call them the JVs. Trump knows that won't happen. But I tell you, folks, we've got to get ready for China. We are not, and we have to. You also have to get ready for the aches and pains that come with aging, and that's happening to you today. You're getting older today. You're getting older to me as I tell you about ReliefFactor.com. By the end of this promotional spot for ReliefFactor.com, you'll be older than when I began. And as you get older, the aches and pains multiply. So if you need support for the temporary relief of them and you're tired of over-the-counters, try ReliefFactor.com. Natural supplements like carrion, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. The 4 natural supplements that combine to help you stave off the aches and pains that go with getting older or good exercise. I did my 10 miles at the beach on Saturday. Little bit sore on Sunday, but fine. A little bit sore, but fine. I would encourage you to try ReliefFactor.com, and I encourage you to come back with Josh Kraushaar, politics editor of National Journal. Follow him at Hotline Josh. Follow me to the next segment on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Lethal Agent, a Mitch Rapp novel by Kyle Mills.
The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 1 minute and 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 45 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 15 seconds. The Hugh Hewitt Show returns from break in 5 seconds.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Josh Kraushaar, politics editor at the National Journal. Follow him on Twitter at Hotline Josh. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning, Hugh.
You retweeted my December tweet criticizing the president's decision then to precipitously withdraw from Syria without comment. Why did you do that?
Well, actually, I mean, we're seeing a very big shift in how Trump is dealing with foreign policy right now in the Middle East. And you saw a very impulsive statement from the White House last night, essentially abandoning our allies, our Kurdish allies.
You're doing a Ron Johnson on me, Josh.
And I was surprised to see you take a very principled position back when, back in 2018, when you and a lot of other Republicans spoke out against it. And I was sort of surprised to see your position then, and listening to the show this morning, taking a different posture this morning.
So why did you retweet my tweet?
Because I thought you were right the first time, Hugh.
But you didn't say that.
Position
but you didn't say that.
Right
That's the problem with Twitter. I wrote about this in the Washington Post yesterday. I don't mind explaining. I had already explained on air, and I was happy to explain to you. A lot has changed in 10 months, and including my trip with John Bolton about this issue to Jerusalem and Ankara. And I have studied it intensively since then, especially the refusal of the NATO allies to take the ISIS people and the expectation that we will stay forever. At the same time, and this is the critical difference, Josh, China has built, I believe, 35 warships since then. 35. Blue Water Navy ships. Does anyone not see what is going on in the world and how we cannot stay everywhere, especially when the Democrats won't pass a defense appropriations bill? I understand Lindsey Graham's upset, but no one supports garrisoning Syria.
Right. So you're saying things have changed, and I read and listened to what you had to say this morning. But Lindsey Graham, who has been an ally of Trump, who's been very, very outspoken on this issue for years and has had the president's ear, doesn't share the same point.
Oh, neither does Kevin McCarthy.
I'd like to hear what John Bolton, who just resigned because of
he's welcome on
with Trump's national security. Well, I'd like to hear what he has to say. I'm sure he has.
But my point, again, you're going Ron Johnson on me. I'm not going to go Chuck Todd on you. But why would you retweet something without a question attached to it? Because it looks like gotcha Twitter. And I know you. I know that that's not what it is. But it's one of the worst parts of social media is an implied criticism as opposed to a straightforward question. Why would you do that?
Well, you make a good. I mean, I should have responded and had a substantive response to the tweet. There's a lot of breaking news this morning. I was trying to put everything in context, but I did respond to you. About 15 or 20 minutes after.
And that's perfect. Good, done. That's what Ron Johnson should have said. He should have said, sorry, Chuck, I'll answer your question, and then I want to make a point. And it would have been fine. Engagement in this country has fallen apart. I really think it's cratered. I wrote about this in the Washington Post yesterday. Justice Gorsuch, General Mattis, and Brad Smith of Microsoft all making the same point, which is engagement has cratered. And this is one of the most complicated issues in the world. And Brett McGurk is out there throwing hammers. And by the way, the SDP is saying, we took down all our defenses. Do you believe that, Josh?
Look, I believe that this is an issue that Republicans and Democrats, and Lindsey Graham, Kevin McCarthy, and John, you mentioned John Bolton. Again, I'd love to hear what he has to say about the president's decision. This was the decision that General Mattis resigned over, but it seems even more impulsive of the way this was handled this time around. We're hearing that the White House didn't inform the Pentagon, the State Department about the statement that was released last night. This is pretty alarming to a lot of national security officials and experts in the field.
Oh, I don't deny that at all. I have been following it. I cannot believe anyone is surprised. They might act surprised. The SDP is going to say that. They can't be surprised. And the big gorilla in the room is what the NBA did yesterday vis-a-vis China. And I want to make sure I get your comment on this. They have sent a signal to Xi Jinping that American business interests won't care if he pulls a Tiananmen Square in Hong Kong. I am outraged at the NBA. What are you?
Outraged as well. And, I think over the last 24 hours, we've seen sort of an absence of moral leadership from all sides. I mean, you have the NBA kowtowing to China because they're dependent, more increasingly dependent on China's business for basketball, and you're seeing and you've had, by the way, you've had bipartisan outrage on both of the issues. You have Graham and McCarthy speaking out against what Trump did to the Kurds and what we're doing in northern Syria, and you're seeing bipartisan outrage with how the NBA is basically pressuring its owner to withdraw comments he made criticizing the Chinese involvement in Hong Kong.
But you know what you haven't seen, Josh? You have not seen bipartisan passage of a defense appropriations bill. So you know what I call on the Democrats. If they want us to garrison Syria, pass the money. If they want us to confront China, pass the money. If they want to build a Navy so that we can be present in the Pacific, pass the money. Democrats won't do it. That's what I think people ought to call them on. And Lindsey ought to be spending his time calling attention to that, not to the fact that we can't, or that he's upset again. It's been 10 months. And meanwhile, every month, every 6 to 8 weeks, the Chinese put 4 ships in the water. People should remember that every 6 to 8 weeks. Josh Kraushaar of Hotline. Thank you, my friend. Hotline, Josh. Don't go anywhere, America, except stay right here. I'll be back tomorrow with 3 more hours of what you need to know. Call your NBA franchise, cancel a game ticket, tell them they are spineless and that they have abandoned the people of Hong Kong. I'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.